Imagine writing a guitar riff so heavy that it got banned from radio because people were afraid that it was going to start riots. That's exactly what Wray did in 1958 when he wrote Rumble on stage live in front of about 5,000 people. Rumble is one of those songs that I remember where I was and what I was doing the first time I heard it. I was watching one of my favorite films of all time, a documentary called It Might Get Loud. I saw it the year it came out in 2008. And in that film, there's a scene of Jimmy Page taking out a 45 and putting it on his record player and listening to Rumble. The song has so much attitude and grit and feeling, it's just unmistakable. Now, the reason I think Rumble is one of the greatest riffs ever written was when it released in 1958, there's a whole generation of guitar heroes that were teenagers at the time, like Jimmy Page, who heard it and were heavily influenced by it to pick up their guitars and start playing rock and roll.
About 5,000 kids out there, you know, because, I mean, rock and roll at that time was huge. Yeah. Everywhere you went, I mean, the kids just like a storm, you know. And I was supposed to get off the stage, and they would put a record on, they would pantomime to the kids, you know. Right. That's the way they did back in those days. Yeah. So instead of Milt going, hey, you just jump on stage, Link, play me a stroll. I said, I don't know a stroll. Doug said, I know the beat behind one. And you think, you know, I said, okay. And I went like this, and then my God, man. Watching me, you know, he said, bam, I went, you know, and the kids, they just went ape. And we had to play about 4 times for the kids. They kept hollering and screaming, you know, banging on the stage, you know, play that weird song, play that weird song.
Wray was born in 1929 in Dunn, North Carolina, to a family that belonged to the Shawnee Native American tribe. Now, there's an incredible documentary that came out a few years ago, I'll have linked down below, called Rumble, The Indians Who Rocked the World. And I watched this documentary earlier this year, and it totally changed my perspective on American music and where it comes from. Now, in that documentary and in interviews, Wray talks about his upbringing in that small North Carolina town, saying the drugstore owner and the sheriff were all KKK members. So his family hid the fact that they were actually Native American. They listed themselves as white on the US Census to try and avoid any persecution from the leaders of the town. He had a pretty tough upbringing by all accounts and went on to serve in the Korean War as part of the United States Army. When he got out of the war, he and his brothers worked as cab drivers during the day in the Norfolk, Virginia area, and then worked nightclubs at night, forming bands and starting to play out around town. Now, being a guitar player and a band leader in the early 1950s in the burgeoning rock and roll scene, Wray was looking for ways to distinguish himself and his sound from other bands. This included doing things like poking holes in his speaker cones with pencils to try and get a more distorted sound from his amplifier. Now, after that night at the sock hop where Wray and the Raymond came up with Rumble, it caught the attention of a record producer named Archie Blyer, who actually somewhat famously hated the song. But his stepdaughter actually loved the song, so he released it anyways.
Where did it come from? How did Rumble get here?
Oh, well, Rumble, I have to say that I have to thank a little 17-year-old girl who's now a grown lady. Rumble was just a little instrumental I did when I was...
Now, there's some contention as to where the name Rumble actually comes from. Some people say that it was the stepdaughter that wanted to name it Rumble. Other people say it was actually Phil Everly of the Everly Brothers who heard it and suggested they name it Rumble because it reminded him of a street fight. And in the early 1950s, Rumble was slang for street fight, which is part of the reason the song was banned in certain radio markets like New York and Boston, because radio programmers at the time thought that a song called Rumble that sounded like that might actually incite street fights, which is about as rock and roll as it gets. Now, the riff itself is incredibly simple, and I think that's actually part of why it's so timeless. So to play it, I've got my 65 SG Junior going into my 64 Gibson Skylark, And actually, interestingly, this is a rig that you would have bought or could have bought in 1965, because this is a student model guitar with a student model amp. But I think it captures the rumble kind of sound really, really well. The riff itself is really simple. It's essentially just a 12-bar blues in the key of E, but he's starting with D, just a D power chord, going from D to E, so flat 7 to 1, and then going from D to A, so flat 7 to 4, and then back flat 7 to 1, and then of course we end on the 5 chord. And then he does the famous walk down, which is just straight down the E minor pentatonic scale. When you listen to the original recording, the drums are doing that driving kind of stroll beat, and it's very sort of laid back and loose, almost drunk kind of feeling. So you've got this driving kind of 4 on the floor feel that lets the guitar just kind of sit and float on top. And I actually think that that's where the attitude and the drive of this song and this riff is coming from. It's the bass and the drums, and then the guitar is giving you that grit and that drive. Now, because of this song, Link Wray actually last week was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by none other than Jimmy Page himself, where they actually covered Rumble live. And it makes sense because this song had such an influence on Page in his later career. So congratulations to Link Wray. I think it's absolutely deserved. And I actually think that this is arguably one of the greatest rock riffs ever written. Not because of the technical prowess or how hard it is to play or anything like that, just based on its influence. It was one of those right place, right time kind of things. Without Link Wray and the Wray Men playing that sock hop in 1957 or 1958 when they came up with Rumble, it's hard to say, but we might not have some of the great music in rock and roll history that we have if it weren't for Rumble. So that's why I think this is probably the greatest rock riff ever written. But I want to know what you think. Let me know in the description box down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe down there if you haven't done so already. If you enjoyed the video, I really appreciate it. It helps the channel out. Thank you so much for watching. My name's Rhett Scholl, and I'll catch you on the next one.